What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the Hater, up in this piece. And I wanted to do a quick video about Randy Orton because, quite frankly, the Hater has never been a massive Randy Orton fan, but I have enjoyed some of Randy Orton's iterations very, very much, right? So that's kind of like where I stand with respect to Randy Orton. Like, there's some versions of Randy Orton that I think are like elite, you know what I'm saying? But the vast majority of Randy Orton is just boring, right? He's not a very exciting guy. But when he is good, he's elite, right? And as you can see on the thumbnail, 2009, I would say, is like peak Orton, during that time when he was just like going after Triple H and shit like that. That was just like really, really well done. He was in his prime in terms of like his appearance with the bald head, like the voluntarily bald head, right? Not he went bald because he's a balding douche like The Rock and Stone Cold and Kurt Angle, because this guy didn't lose his hair. He really is that dude. But he just did it because it just looked more menacing. You know what I mean? Now, Randy Orton of 2009 is one of I would put him top 5 characters ever, right? Because he was written so well. You know what I mean? Like the whole going after Triple H, when he started doing the punt, that was awesome. It just felt like a big deal. He felt like this dangerous guy that could take out anybody over the smallest of things, right? And this was so good and effective that it ultimately became his gimmick, right? He became this IED Orton, right? Intermittent explosive disorder, where at any given second, Randy Orton was prone to just going crazy violent and just putting someone out, right? And he did it to people all the time. He punted Vince McMahon, Triple H. He did the Orton DDT and kissed Stephanie McMahon in front of Triple H. He punted CM Punk out of the WWE for 9 months. You know what I mean? Randy Orton during this time was a menace, right? He was a threat, and he felt like the most dangerous guy on the roster, right? It's not so much that Randy Orton was bigger and stronger than, let's say, the Big Show, right? But it was more that he's willing to do things that other people are not willing to do, right? One of my favorite moments ever, aside from the aforementioned him DDTing Stephanie and kissing her in front of Triple H, which I thought was just great TV, was when he is about to punt Cena, and then he just rolls out of the ring, and in 2 moves, basically, 2 seconds, he grabs Cena's dad, throws him over the guardrail, and then punts him to the outside, right? This was just great. This is the Randy Orton where they struck gold finally. After, let's be real, years of mediocrity, they finally had something great on their hands, right? Because if we're being honest, right? When Randy Orton became world champion, he didn't really feel like a world champion, right? Yes, I know he beat Benoit, who was a mid-card jobber, but Benoit at that point had won the Royal Rumble coming in at number 2, or number 1, whatever the fuck it was, and perhaps more importantly than that, he had main event at WrestleMania and won the title there. So he felt like a big deal as a result of that, whereas, Randy Orton didn't, right? It was presented almost as a fluke. His face run against Triple H didn't work really well either. He dropped the title back to Triple H almost immediately, and Triple H held it for the rest of the year to drop it to Batista, right? It just fell flat, right? It wasn't until he went after The Undertaker after that, right? Where basically he had already become champion, and the whole point is all right, now I'm gonna go after The Undertaker because he has something that I want, the streak, right? Orton became the first guy to legitimately go after the streak for the sake of making a name for himself, right? Everybody else up until that point just wanted to wrestle Undertaker for a different reason, or they just didn't like The Undertaker, you know what I mean? Randy Orton was doing it specifically so that he could end the streak and be that dude, right? And that fit the character at the time really well. Now, all good things must come to an end, and the Hater understands this. The Hater is not saying that we would need to have the same Randy Orton again and again and again, but maybe it's time for this Orton to make a comeback, especially given the circumstances that the character of Randy Orton finds himself in now. Now, he needs to essentially reestablish himself as a non-mid-carder. Randy Orton went from that guy who would punt you in the head to a guy begging for matches this Friday night on SmackDown, right? Begging. Randy Orton, the guy that will punt your father in the head if you cross him in any capacity, right? Triple H, who is now a suit, Randy Orton calls him a suit basically, and instead of putting his hands on him like we all want, Randy Orton is like, please, Hunter, I beg of you. He literally said, I beg of you, right? What the hell happened to the cool Randy Orton? Why don't they want to give us that guy again? Why are people lazy with respect to Randy Orton, right? And I mean, clearly the answer is because Randy Orton is old, quote unquote, but he really isn't that old. I think it's more that Randy Orton is not motivated because he's already had the moments. He's already main evented WrestleMania several times. And as a result of main eventing WrestleMania, even though he's never won a WrestleMania main event, you know what I mean? He definitely has main evented WrestleMania many times. But Randy Orton, the problem with Randy Orton is that, like, now, you know, he doesn't want to be the champion, the workhorse, right? The guy that's out there making the appearances, making the tours. But here's the kicker. Gunther and Cody, who are the champions, they don't do that either. So at this point, you have Randy Orton, who's like 4 or 5 years older than Cody Rhodes. You could just have him do what Cody Rhodes does, right? Surely Randy Orton can come out every week, he does it anyways, and cut a promo. He's better on the mic than Cody Rhodes, and Randy Orton is not good on the mic. You see what I'm saying? Randy Orton is someone that you still have, relatively speaking, in his prime, right? I remember during that Royal Rumble where The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were probably around the same age as Orton is now, like in their mid-40s, right? And JBL's like, we got two guys on our prime, Michael, right? And the whole point was like, yeah, you know they're not in their prime, but they're still good. They can still go, right? Randy Orton is in that situation as well. But instead of having matches where he can still go, they just put him in like boring-ass segments. And this is inexcusable, you know? You have like a bona fide legend, one of the only people in the company that feels like a main eventer, or that could, I should say, feel like a main eventer, because now he feels like a mid-carder for being 100%, you know? But you have this guy there, and you don't utilize him. You put him in a match against Kevin Owens. Like, this match should go as follows. The bell rings, Owens runs, Orton just RKOs him right then and there, right? Then he cocks back, he just moves backwards, and running punts Kevin Owens right in the head, right? And that's the end. That's the end of Kevin Owens. Then Kevin Owens gets released quietly, and he can go show up on AEW as like a guy with a gimmick of having like brain damage from the punt or something. I don't care, right? That's what should happen here. Kevin Owens doesn't bring anything to this company at all. And Randy Orton is a legend who has done more in 1 year than Kevin Owens will do his entire career. So the idea here, in my personal opinion, is that people don't want to give credit where credit is due anymore. And for some reason, even though the likes of Kevin Owens are clearly inferior, or the likes of Cody Rhodes are clearly inferior, we have to pretend that Randy Orton sucks now, right? And when we pretend to do that, we have to thus conclude that this pretending is turning into reality. And Randy Orton now sucks. He's a mid-card jobber. Nobody cares about him anymore. You know, like his role on any given WrestleMania went from that Chris Jericho role where it's like he could have like a singles match with anybody, because Orton had that. Like for the longest time in his career, he had that role where it's like any given WrestleMania, it could be, you know, you would see like Randy Orton versus CM Punk, Randy Orton versus Kane or something like that, Randy Orton versus fucking, let's see who else, versus like Seth Rollins. You would see these kinds of matches. He would have like a marquee moment on the card. Now you can expect Randy Orton to be in some sort of tag match, in some sort of fatal four-way for like the mid-card title, you know, that kind of stuff, right? He's no longer a main event guy. And at this point, it's like, there's no need to keep him around at all anymore, right? Like, I don't think anybody who has any interest in seeing mid-card Randy Orton, you know? Nobody has an interest in seeing Randy Orton versus Chad Gable, right? A match that like 10 years ago would end with Orton just throwing him onto the ropes, doing the vintage Orton DDT and punting him in the head and keeping him out of action for like 9 months. You see what I'm saying? Nobody has any interest in seeing this boring-ass version of Randy Orton, right? And the thing that pisses me off the most is that I know that the way they justify it in kayfabe is like with age, right? They're like, oh, Orton is old now. But Kevin Owens is like 40 years old. Randy Orton is what? Like, he's got to be like 45, right? I don't think he's older than 45. 44, he's 44. He's only 4 years older than Kevin Owens, right? He's only 4 years older than Kevin Owens. And like, we're supposed to believe that Kevin Owens is better because he's 40 and not 44? Are you kidding me? This is the guy that like wrestled Undertaker believably. This is the guy that burned Undertaker alive after putting him in like in a casket, right? This guy is now supposed to be, we're supposed to believe that this guy who punted Vince McMahon in the head, who sexually assaulted Vince McMahon's daughter, aka Triple H's wife, right, in front of Triple H, and then beat him with a sledgehammer. We're supposed to believe that now this guy is content wrestling Kevin Owens, who when Randy Orton was doing this, Kevin Owens was busy in ROH wrestling a guy with a baseball for a face. You know what I'm saying? Wrestling some Shikara guy. Oh, Mr. Baseball Head, whatever the fuck that shit was. Oh, it's going to be Kevin Owens versus Fire Ant tonight, right? Meanwhile, Randy Orton is like fighting The Undertaker, you know? And now they're equals? Like, have you people lost your minds? So the only thing that I can think of is I seriously wished that Orton just retired 3 years ago. Straight up. Because he was gone for like 18 months, which is a year and a half, and then he's been back for a year since then, and these 3 years have been a colossal disaster. It's been a complete failure. There's no point to these last 3 years. I mean, I guess he's made a couple $1 million doing nothing and then wrestling like Carmelo Hayes and shit like that. That's fine. Good for him. But the character of Randy Orton is completely done. You know, there's one opportunity to save him, and that's basically like, I mean, the best opportunity would have been SmackDown, where he's like, Triple H, I want a match. Triple H says no, and Randy Orton looks at him and says, please rethink that. Triple H says, no, Randy, it's not happening. And then Randy Orton just headbutts him, right? And Triple H is all like discombobulated, and Randy Orton just punts him in the head. That's the way to fix the Randy Orton character. To have him go back to being that guy that was willing to like punt you and your father in the head. Like he's willing to like hurt your family for real, you know what I mean? Instead, Randy Orton, instead of hearkening back to that, he hearkened back to how Triple H beat his ass, right? Randy Orton has taken the submissive position now in wrestling, right? Instead of saying like, where's the guy who nearly killed me after I sexually assaulted his wife, humiliated him, and punted him in the head and beat him with his own sledgehammer. Where's that guy? He's like, where's the guy that beat my ass from pillar to post? What? What are you talking about? You know, this has been a complete disaster. Randy Orton needs to be released at this point, or they need to course correct immediately. You know, at this point, it wouldn't even be weird for Kevin Owens to beat Randy Orton. You know, it'd be like, oh, yeah, Kevin Owens beat Randy Orton. Who cares, right? And it should have never been like that, right? It should have never been like that. Wrestlers in the caliber of Randy Orton are always protected. Like you knew, for example, Taker could be 55 and he could come back to wrestling, right? And, you know, like he's going to come back at WrestleMania and he's going to wrestle like a big deal type of guy. Like he could wrestle like Brock Lesnar or something like that. But he's not going to be like wrestling, you know, like Sami Zayn. Like, you know what I mean? You're never going to see Sami Zayn versus Undertaker in a competitive match. You know? Maybe in 10 years, that's what Randy Orton will be doing, but who the fuck knows? For now, he's a mid-card jobber. And this is because he's not protecting his character. You know what I mean? If you stick around in your, like, older age for a while and you just get your ass beat by people like Kevin Owens, then you can't come back and have, like, the Goldberg moments or the Lesnar moments or the Undertaker moments in your 50s, right? 10 years from now, Randy Orton, I'm sure, will be in excellent shape still. He could come in and do an RKO on, like, whoever the fuck's going to be the main eventer in 10 years. Probably like Javon Evans. You know what I mean? They can have their match again. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could come do that, but now it's like, oh, well, last time we saw you was 10 years ago. You're getting your ass beat by Sami Zayn. So, like, how can you be better now than you were 10 years ago, right? The smart ones, the Goldbergs of the world, they leave while they're on top. So then when they come back in their 50s, you can feasibly present them as, oh, this guy would have been dominating for the last 20 years if he stuck around, but he didn't. But if you're out there losing to Kevin Owens, you can't come back and like challenge for the WWE title in your 50s like The Rock does, right? Because when The Rock left, he was wrestling at WrestleMania against, ironically, Randy Orton, Batista, Triple H, Ric Flair, you know what I mean? He was wrestling in this kind of capacity. So he was always on top. And now he can come back and wrestle the guy who's on top. You know what I mean? And that's the problem with Randy Orton. That is now outside of the realm of possibility for Randy Orton. And that's a shame, Cuckold. That's a shame.